You're listening to The Deep Dive with Jason Sarney, a Miami Dolphins podcast on the Addicts Network.
Hello, everybody. Jason Sarney here with the Addicts Network, and I got a terrific show here. I'd like to welcome all of you to join us, and Byrne and Douglie Do Wrong. So welcome, gentlemen, and we'll start with the mayor of YouTubeville, Douglie Do Wrong. How you doing, my friend?
I'm good. I like the title, the mayor of YouTubeville. I appreciate that.
You got my vote anytime. And Godfather of the dad joke and the Addict Network, BB. Byrne, how you doing, kid?
Dude, I'm really good. Thanks for letting me come and be the executive producer of the Deep Dive. I think we're gonna have a lot of fun.
You sign the checks, you pay the bills, you're the boss. So we will allow it. So before we do the deep dive, gentlemen, just want to do the Addict Network kind of where to find us, and we'll allow, of course, DDW to do the same before we go all into this. So you can find us on Apple, on Google Podcasts, on Spotify. Make sure you're doing checking in with Savak, and make sure you're going to check in with Brian's show with Jimmy Kearns. He's got some betting shows coming up, and obviously, if you have any phone ability to give us a call and leave us a message, ask a question, the Addicts hotline is 786-309-7558. So, DDW, what is going on in your world?
Not much, man. Training camp somewhat started. I made a video late last night, essentially talking about the press conference with Fitz, McCain, and Jesse Davis, and kind of noticed that in there, training camp kind of started. They're kind of going through run-throughs. So other than that, not really much, just doing the YouTube stuff, trying to branch out, doing stuff like this. So just having fun, enjoying it, and hoping and praying to whoever's up above that we get some football in September.
Hear you there, with you there, and you really do a terrific job. So if anyone out there has not checked out Douglie's show, please do. Excellent stuff. He's had great guests. So with that said, let us do this deep dive. So Byrne, I'll start with you. We're not going to spend so much time on the special team unit of building the 53-man roster, and that's got an asterisk to it because, you got that special team. that practice squad, as well as 55-man. You can bring two players up. So we'll try to stick with that 53-man theme, and then we'll get to the other two for week one at the end. So, Byrne, how do you see the special teams unit shaping up?
Yeah, I think that's pretty easy. I don't even think we have competition for Sanders and Hack this year, so they're locked in. Blake Ferguson was absolutely locked in as our long snapper until he got COVID. And I didn't even get the guy's name out of Virginia Tech, and we signed a long snapper yesterday. But I would still give Blake Ferguson probably the edge over everyone else, and you invest a 6th-round pick in him. Pretty straightforward on the special teams.
Very straightforward. Got a good kicking unit. There may be some competition, as you said, with that long snapper situation with, of course, rookie Blake Ferguson having, that COVID designation. Yeah, and, going a little bit backdated, guys, if you don't mind, there has been news. There has been some COVID opt-outs. You bring a good point, Byrne. The Dolphins have had situations recently with Jerome Baker, Zach Seiler put on the list recently. Now, C.J. Mosley was said. A lot of AFC East affecting these teams as the Jets, the Patriots. But what do you guys think is going on in terms of what the Dolphins are doing and handling their situations? And we'll start with you, Doug.
I love what they're doing. If you guys remember, the Hard Rock Stadium was the first stadium to be cleared as like one of the COVID safe places. They started showing movies and stuff there. Stephen Ross was above and beyond ahead of every other team when it came to that. So I feel like that's a lot of the reason why these players aren't opting out, is because like Fitz said, like Bobby said, like Jesse Davis said, they came in and they felt incredibly safe coming in and practicing and being in this facility because of how advanced they are in that situation. But when it comes to opt-outs, even the Buffalo Bills, I think they had one of their defensive ends opt out. The Dolphins are the only AFC East team that hasn't had an opt out yet. Oh, I wish I had that. This isn't wood. This is like polycarbonated stuff. But I really hope that it stays that way. But then you got to think about this, right? Say the Dolphins don't have an opt-out. You know, Patriots have 7. I think the Jets have like 1 or 2. Bills have 1 or 2. Say the Dolphins win the division. You know for a fact these Patriot fans and all these other ones are going to be like, well, that's because we had opt-outs. So I see it happening, but I hope things keep staying in that trend where the Dolphins, stay safe. They self-quarantine themselves. They make their own little bubble, because I know that the NFL isn't doing the bubble thing, which they should, because every other sport is doing really well with their whole bubble thing.
Right.
But just stick with it. Stick with what you're doing. Stay healthy. Stay safe. Wash your hands.
I love it. And you know what? You see this, and before we bring Brian in on that, the Dolphins have done, as you mentioned, terrific job. You see videos of Christian Wilkins walking into the building through Dolphin social media, and lo and behold, the door's open, so people aren't, having to push the door open. And there's hand sanitizer right there. And, it's just everyone's just complying. So whatever it is, you're complying, and I like it. And Brian, what are your thoughts on everything? And, how do you basically foresee the next couple of weeks kind of playing out here?
Yeah, I mean, we've been definitely really lucky with the no opt-outs. I think that has a bit to do with roster construction. I think we have a lot of younger, really hungry guys that aren't as established as, like some of the people that have taken hits in New England, like Patrick Chung and Dante Hightower, and now CJ Mosley with the Jets. But yeah, like Doug touched on, it's a first-class facility with a first-class ownership. And I think the safety that they've instilled in these guys has really, helped facilitate that. That being said, this story doesn't end at opt-outs, because regardless if 10 people opt out or no people opt out, the roster is going to flip left and right because of COVID, and we're going to really get to, we're going to go deep dive into the roster today, the 80 people that get invited to camp. There's a good chance we see all 80 people on the field at some point this year, and if it's not these 27 guys that get cut, come back, it will probably be others, because there's going to be a lot of fluctuation. We're going to see guys we might never see again. There might be weeks where we have entire offensive lines that isn't our normal starters, and I'm definitely looking at those position groups that are really close, the D-line, the linebackers, the O-line, as kind of the most susceptible to this because of how close quarters they always are and how many people are in their team meetings and things like that is going to make it harder. But it's a crazy world. We all just got to figure it out on a day-to-day basis.
Well said. And if we could just dive right into the position groups within the units, we'll go with defense to start. And, you mentioned, and Doug, when we were discussing on your show a week or so back, we focused on defensive line. And Brian, to piggyback off of your point, that, is a trench position where, you're literally elbow to elbow, shoulder pad to shoulder pad. So I think you got to circle depth as the key element for defensive line. When you look at the defensive ends, when you look at the nose tackles, the defensive tackles, there were a lot of rookies. There were people brought in to play the outside like an Agba and a Shaq Lawson. So it is paramount to get a good amount of bodies on this team, even if it means maybe carrying a smaller amount of, wide receivers or a smaller amount of linebackers. That is a huge position group, defensive line, for this defense to work. So, Doug, what are your thoughts on, we don't have to necessarily name everyone who we like. We obviously know who's making this team from the top-heavy aspects of it, but let's focus on some of these rookies. Let's focus on some of these undrafted guys. Do you think anyone's on a bubble to not make it? I mean, look, we mentioned Styler has the COVID situation. Let's kind of leave him on that list of COVID IR for now, those protected guys. So other than him, what are we looking at here?
It's funny too, because, you look at the D-line and they brought in a lot of talent on that D-line. And I say it as a Dolphin fan, but if you're like a Texans fan looking at the Dolphin team, you're like, there's a bunch of nobodies, Shaq Lawson, Agba. Yeah, they had about 5.5 sacks each. Whoop-de-doo. Christian Wilkins. It's because I'm a Dolphin fan, I have in-depth study on all of our players. So I think it's talent. But you look at Curtis Weaver, you look at Strawbridge, right? These guys should have been third-round picks. We got them in the 5th. Those guys are super talented. You look at Raekwon Davis, like this guy is just a beast up the middle. And even Nick Saban came out and he said, you need to get this guy more snaps. The more snaps you get out of him, the more production you'll get out of him. I'm wondering, what type of position he was in with those last 2 years in Alabama. But, for Saban to come out and say that and to see the excitement from Brian Flores, it's, I'm really excited for that. And then we have those young guys. We have undrafted guys. But, Zeiler is a guy that I was very excited when we got. And, him being on the list doesn't necessarily mean he'll be on there for a while, because there's a defensive tackle that was on the list and then the next day they took him off. It's more precautionary. I'm really interested to see what Zeiler, Strawbridge, Davis, and Weaver, all these young guys can do. Because like Brian was saying, it's the depth. You got these big guys, you got these – and that's a lot of times that COVID hits the hardest is the bigger people, the bigger, heavier guys. That's why if you notice, a lot of the guys that are, opting out are offensive linemen, defensive linemen. So to have that depth, to have those young guys, that's what Brian Flores did this offseason. He didn't do the sexy picks. We got a few with, Igbenogany and Tua, obviously.
Right.
But he wants to build that trench so that, God forbid, someone does get injured, you just plug someone else in, or you have that rotation on the defensive line, and it's just constantly fresh pressure on the opposing quarterback. And I think that the youth on this team right now is really going to propel this team to the next level.
It's a youth movement. I've been preaching that for a while. And that's why, err on the side of potential and youth as opposed to what we've seen on the field in contract and years. So, Brian, if you could highlight any individual, agree with Doug on he's saying Dolphins stole in the draft some high quality day 2 talent, and that's just in the 4th, 5th. That was all day. The 5th round obviously went to Breida, but you know what I mean. So, Brian, dissecting a bit more on that defensive line, and to piggyback on your point, anyone at risk or who's key on this position group?
Yeah, we're living in a really weird training camp world, right? We would get a lot more clarity tomorrow if this was a normal season, where these guys are lining up. There's so much flexibility with these guys. Like, are we going to be base 3-4? Are these guys going to be at outside linebacker or DN? So, I really want to get that first padded practice to get a better idea of, Omar Kelly reported that Weaver looks more like a defensive end in a 3-4 than he does an outside linebacker. He's just got huge trunk. So, I really want to get some clarity on where these guys are lining up. I think we can pretty much lock them in. I'm really looking at Raekwon Davis. I like that Doug brought on that. He was one of my favorite draft picks. Dolphins Twitter went nuts that we didn't get J.K. Dobbins, but I was glad that we got we were 30th against the run last year. So Raekwon Davis is a mean run-stuffing D tackle that, in the year they won the national championship, he also rushed the passer with 8.5 sacks. So he has that ability. I can't wait to see him. I think where it's going to come down to the bubble guys are probably Seiler versus Benito Jones. Yep. It's going to be a good competition there. But a lot's going to be a lot's going to come out of where these guys are actually lining up. How often our base defense is in there, how, what looks we're giving. Because, between the D line, in linebackers, you pretty much have Gaucho, Wilkins, and Davis as locked middle guys. Then everyone else could line up anywhere else on that line. So we'll have to see. But, yeah, I think that's the position battle to watch right now for the roster bubble spot.
Love it. You mentioned Benito. I'm going to throw in, a guy that, we've mentioned before, Doug. Brian, I know you know Tyshawn Render. This is going to be an interesting guy, too, because he's getting paid, good money for someone who was an undrafted free agent. He obviously has the eye of some other coach who's got a couple of rings in Bill Belichick. So if he does not make a roster and if he's kind of wavering out there, he's going to be picked up by somebody. So I think that Render is a guy that you got to kind of say it's his job to lose. If he loses the ability to make this roster, it's kind of on him, but he has all the talent in the world to make the roster. Benito Jones is a guy who I think might be, I'll use a relative term here, Brian, practice squad safe. You think he could be a guy who the Dolphins think, maybe not a 53, maybe he's 55, maybe he's 57. You think that he can get scooped up?
Yeah, I mean, you have to see what he does in camp before we know that. But yeah, I definitely think we talked about this earlier in the week. I think when it's going to come down to it, Flores is probably going to err on the side of potential and look at guys like Jones and Render over a guy like Seiler if it's close, because Seiler's been in the league for a few more years. And we've kind of seen where he can cap out. He did have the one great game last year, but then he kind of went invisible too. So he flashed some good tape. But I definitely think that we'll err on that side of youth. And, we have pretty much the youngest team in the league. So it's going to give a heads up to guys like Render and Jones. I liked your call on Render. I forgot about him briefly there. And, he's definitely was the undrafted free agent that we targeted. So he's going to definitely have a leg up over some of the vets.
Yeah, I mean, that's just the general theme. And, Doug, for any last, additions on that position group in the defensive line, and just let me just add, I am so on board with Raekwon Davis with you and so excited with you, both of you guys. I think literally, and I'm not the only one, we are not the only three, everyone's circling that guy as a potential key. So any last thoughts on the defensive line?
I think that this unit is probably the most improved of all the units. Yes, we'll get to secondary, but yes, I honestly do, because we were bottom in the league with 23 sacks. We bring in Agba and Lawson, who had 12 sacks between the two of them on a limited basis. So, we bring in two guys that was half the team's sacks last year. Could not stop the run if our lives depended on it. So what does Brian Flores, Chris Greer go and do? They get guys that can set the edge, and they get the big guys up the middle that can stop the run. So I'm very excited for this defensive line. I'm hoping they play like I'm imagining, because if they do, the secondary and the linebackers are just going to have a feeding day. And it's going to be awesome to see this defense go from 30th rank to, hopefully, I'm going to be, cautious, let's say 15th rank. I'd be ecstatic for that.
You're doubling your worth essentially in that regard. And, there's only really one way to go from the Dolphins rankings in all aspects of the team. We all know that. It's the extent of it. There's that depth battle, guys like a Ray Smith, we obviously have the Brazilian import, Neto. So I don't know how valid those guys are to make this team, but there is depth. There was terrific rookies. And this defensive line, there's a lot of cliches in football, guys. One of my favorites is you build from the inside out. And lo and behold, we're talking about defensive line. And when we go to offense, we're going to really, really take wild guesses and scrutinize the offensive line. I kind of can't wait, and I'm nervous for that. But moving backwards, we'll just go out. You build from the line out. So let's talk about the middle unit, the linebackers, which is for lack of a better term, a fun unit to discuss. And we'll start with our prestigious guest, DDW number 18, as you see over his shoulder, which we've already established is one of my favorite numbers, across from my other favorite number 13, quarterback with the best right arm that's ever been on a football field.
Sir,
I digress. We'll go into the linebackers. What are your thoughts on the linebackers, regardless of sets, 3-4-4-3, amoeba, spaghetti on a plate, regardless of what it is? Give us your linebacker assessment.
I like the spaghetti on the plate.
Not mine. Took it from, I think, James Lofton. Got to give credit where credit's due.
This is the first time, and I can't remember when, that I'm very excited and comfortable for our linebacking core. I may be a little too optimistic with this one, and it might come out and shoot myself in the foot with this one, but it's been, us being Dolphin fans, how long have we been praying for a good linebacking core? At some point we had Kevin Burnett. We're bringing in Darnell Ellerby and just poop on poop on poop. Zach Thomas Jr. Those were the times where we were like, we could stop the run. We can actually do something with our linebacking core. And then for like about a decade, we had just nothing at linebacker core. It was always just missed tackle, blown coverage. Come on, you're not in the right spot. Now we got Jerome Baker, speedy guy, can play sideline to sideline, can be a QB spy. We see what he could do when he blitzes. We're bringing Kyle Van Noy from the Patriots, a very smart linebacker, going to be the brains of this linebacking core. Vince Beagle, the guy was leading the team last year, a horrible team in quarterback hits, tied for tackles for loss. Sam McGuavin, a guy we get for the Canadian Football League, comes out and has a very good preseason, tends to disappear during the season, but towards the end, getting his thing. Ginkle, a high draft pick of ours, I think 3rd round, 4th round draft pick of ours. Guy came in off of the IR, started to produce. We have this, and then you got Raekwon McMillan, one of the top-ranked run-stopping linebackers in the NFL. And that's just like projected starters. You got Gruger Hill, you got Roberts. For the first time, I'm looking at this linebacker core, and I'm like, who's going to get cut? Like, who's not going to make the team? Because I doubt they're going to run with like 8 linebackers, even though they're, are they going to run a 4-3, 5-2, 3-4 roaming? Like, what are they going to run? But for the first time in a very long time, I look at this linebacker core and I could take a deep breath and say, all right, this is good. We got something here. So I'm excited. I'm very excited for the linebacking core.
Definitely have something. There's speed. You mentioned pass rushing ability by a Beagle. Beagle showed the ability to play inside, to play outside. So even if it's the depth, I'm just saying, all right, you know what? It's 2nd and 8, but you know what? Beagle, take a blow. We're going to have to get Raekwon McMillan in there. We're going to have to just kind of do this rotation. Gruger Hill, Landon Roberts. And then we're not even talking about the incumbent, or you just mentioned him in Baker. But now with him being on the list, Brian, we get the ability to hear more, to, hear about those free agents, and obviously we know Van Noy. You know what you're going to get with the Van Noy. But now it's, can Andrew Van Ginkel repeat his last 5, played 5-6 games last year after the foot injury? Can Beagle build, he's going into his 4th year, Brian. So what are your thoughts, to piggyback off of Doug's thoughts on those linebackers, the depth? Who's the odd man out,
Yeah. That I can't figure out. I actually posted that in a poll last week because, you got to look at it and where do they make room for Sam McGuavin? But based on his play last year, that would be a really difficult cut. He's not a Pro Bowl caliber player, but he is a really solid guy you want in your locker room, that you want it on the field. But there's so much depth. They brought in the 2 guys, Roberts, or 3 guys, I'm sorry, Van Noy, Roberts, and I can't say the other guy's name, Gruger, we'll call him Hill, who has a lot of speed. I'm very excited about this unit. I think it's completely morphed into something great. I think there's going to be so much flexibility of guys playing outside linebacker and switching to D end, and, guys playing in the middle and switching outside. I think, like what Flores is searching for is that completely dynamic defense that he ran in New England, and he just didn't have the guys to run it last year. But, he's really rounded out this linebacking core with a lot of talent, and we can't say middle linebacker is going to be these 3 guys, because that's not what this team's going to look like. But yeah, I have no idea who you cut off this core. I'm very excited about it, but Doug brought up that we haven't had the great linebacking in a long time in Miami, but I think it started with what we started to build on. The first thing that we covered was the D end. When we had great linebackers, we had Daryl Gardner and Tim Bowens. Now with Davis and Wilkins being 1st and 2nd round picks in consecutive years, we already have Godshaw there. Bringing in, I liked what you said about Agba and why am I losing the name right now? Our other signing, they are Lawson. I'm sorry. They're edge setters just as much as they are pass rushers. They can be both roles, and I think they more excel as edge setters than they do as pass rushers, and that's going to make these linebackers have the ability to run free. I like Hill for that reason. If we do block it up front with those big guys, Hill's got the speed to get all over the place. I definitely want to see more out of Jerome Baker. He was all over the field last year. And I don't know what to criticize him, because again, we didn't have those guys taking up the blocks, at the first level. So, but Baker only had 3.5 tackles for loss last year when he had over 100 tackles. So that needs to improve. We need to see growth out of that. We need to get McMillan on the field more often. So I can't wait to see the growth on them, but I'm definitely very excited about this group. I hate to say Aguavin may not make this team, but he has to be the vulnerable one, I think. But I have no idea how many they're going to keep, because this isn't a static situation where we're looking at guys at linebacker and DN. This is, well, who can play all 3, because those guys are going to get the leg up.
I'm seeing like 11, 12 guys that are in camp at the linebacking position. So you're absolutely right. You circle. I mean, look, they brought in 5 free agents. You know what I mean? That's an exaggeration. You paid good money for a trio of New England-based and a little sprinkle of Gregor Hill in Philly. Money there. It's funny because we all joke around, and our buddy Savak, correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, but he put out a Twitter post saying, what's the nickname for the linebacker core? And, I love my nicknames, as I think you guys have all known. And I have a name that I don't love because it's like kind of insulting, but it's not an insult because it's the Expendables. Someone's going. We love them all. They're all great. They're all individually could kind of blockbuster movie headline. Who doesn't want to see Andrew Van Ginkel destroy a bunch of terrorists or something in a movie? But but
he looks like he is the terrorist.
Someone's going. Vince Beagle jumping out of a helicopter trying to kick butt. I'll sign me up. You got my $12.50. But is Raekwon McMillan a guy who's going to be maybe someone calls up? We have a linebacker on the COVID list. We have a linebacker on injured reserve.
It's a possibility.
Got a draft for him. Got a draft pick for him. We need someone to help stop the run.
Yeah.
Is there a trade on the horizon potentially, or do you see cuts done?
I see cuts, and you bringing up the trade aspect also, reminisces of literally 2-3 weeks before the season last year, and that blockbuster trade. I could see, and I agree with Brian, and it breaks my heart because if you followed my channel last year, I had to learn his name, Sam McGuavin. I was pronouncing it wrong, and I loved him in training camp, preseason. But the amount of talent they brought in, it's just, you're going to have to bust your hump to make this roster. And I love that aspect. Like, it's not just, oh, we suck, so we'll take whoever. No, now you have to make the roster. And like you said, Jason, if someone calls up and they're like, hey, we'll offer you a third for Raekwon McMillan, you might pull that trigger, because I don't know if he signs a contract with another team. Say the Dolphins don't sign him. I don't know if the contract he signs with another team will be enough to get that third compensation. So you might pull the trigger on it. It's a possibility. I do see at least 1 or 2 people getting traded. Who it is, I don't want to say really, because it'll just piss people off. But I could see 1 or 2 people getting traded somewhat, especially nowadays where, we don't have preseason to see it. So it's like, we need talent. This is what this guy did last year. Let's try to pull the trigger on it.
Right. And Brian, getting back to the type of player, guy who can play all 3 positions. You look at a Van Noy, and one of the favorite things about a Van Noy is, he just says, I'm a football player, and that's the mindset. That's the Flores mindset. And not saying that any of these, linebackers do not have that mindset, because frankly, I don't think they'd be on the team if they don't. But there is talent. There's the ability to do certain responsibilities. So when it comes down to it, and Aguavin is a great story. You'd love to have him continue the run. But if there is an expendable, it might be someone who just, we've seen potentially the ceiling. It's been a fun rise and elevator, Brian, but how do we wrap up the linebacking core, and what do you see fit there?
Yeah, I'm not, and like you said, we're not going to be able to see it in preseason, so we're not going to see these guys' roles, shape up as they're going to be. So it's all going to be behind closed doors, but it's going to be a fierce competition. I would say actually, like, McMillan may be one of the safest players on here, because no one of this really deep room, no one else can do what he does. There's not that big middle linebacker, run stuffing guy that we will need for at least 2 downs. There's no one behind him that does that. So that gives him a big advantage. Like Beagle and Van Ginkel, very similar players. Baker and Hill, very similar players, so having that one guy that just what he does is going to give him a big heads up. But we're going to have to see how it shakes out. We're going to have to see where Curtis Weaver ends up. If he ends up as more of an outside linebacker than a DN, that could shake up this group. So I think it's just going to behoove all these guys to be able to play in multiple roles. And it's not going to be like last year where you can just prove that you're on the field. It's like, you're going to have to prove that you can play 2 positions, or you're not going to have a chance.
Exactly. It's going to be a component of that. It's going to be a component of the next man up. So really do what is asked of you, and that's the kind of guys that this team is bringing in, signing, and hopefully we'll be retaining when push comes to shove, and we get to see what's going on in these battles. So we'll see some cuts on the linebacking side of things. It will be interesting. And Doug, you got something going there. I really should not name people who might be traded. Don't want hate mail. Don't want the mentions blowing up. But it's a business. And the one thing I will say, just look at the guys that were traded last year. If those guys were traded, no one's safe. And with that said, let's go to look, guys, we could talk about any other position group on this team. But if you don't think that the best position group on this team is the cornerback unit, I don't know what to tell you, because this is a top 3 unit of defensive backs in the league, and we all like to wear our orange and aqua glasses, DDW. And hey, you got that LED light in the back? Can we go to orange if we're talking about it? Love it. See, that's why you're you. That's why you're you. What are we going to do about this cornerback situation other than just sit back and say, wow, this is fun?
I love the cornerback position. I love that Brian Flores literally came out and said you can never have enough cornerbacks. It also kind of hints towards the type of defense he's going to be running, especially if we start to, week 1, we're facing Cam Newton. And you saw what the San Diego Chargers in 2018's playoff run did against Lamar Jackson by having a ton of DBs on the field to make sure he's not running all over them. So with him saying you can never have enough corners kind of hints a little bit at the type of defense they're going to be running. They might run that dime set, that big dime set. There's, it throws it in there. I love the pickup of Byron Jones. I've talked about how he has shut down, Michael Thomas. He had him allowed 2 for 3 catches for 21 yards. Michael Thomas, like the one of the best receivers in the league. I've raffled down lists of him shutting down people left and right. Yes, he doesn't have the interceptions. He doesn't have the sexy picks, but that's because no one's throwing at him.
Exactly.
What are you going to do? He's going to shut your receiver down. You're not going to throw it that way. Xavier Howard, for the love of God, stay healthy and stay on the field. If not, I'm going to cry, because I've banged the table for this guy constantly when people think we should trade him. He needs to stay healthy. The fact that he is on PUP, I'm not worried about, because he literally can come off tomorrow if he needs to. What happened?
Strategic PUP. You're
exactly.
Right.
It means nothing. It's just, let's take it along slowly. Let's not push him, because we've seen what happened. Tannehill never had the surgery on the knee, thought he was all right, went to stop running, boom, injured himself. Take it easy on these star guys. But again, scares the crap out of me. I'm super, super cautious with him. When he's on the field, super dynamic, one of the best cornerbacks in the league. I don't care what anyone says. Noah Benogany, 30th pick. No Dolphin in their right mind, fan or anyone, thought that the Dolphins were going to take a corner when they traded with the Green Bay Packers. I thought it was going to be a safety. I thought it was going to be a guard. I thought it was going to be a running back. And they take corner. And then Brian Flores again makes me learn another player's name that's hard to pronounce, Noah Igbenogany. But it just works, because then him, Nick Needham, Tankersley, they're going to have to compete for that slot corner or potential boundary corner, depending on what happens with Xavier Howard. But the whole secondary as a whole is a huge amalgamation, because safety corner, it's like a back and forth thing with Brian Flores. He loves to just move them around. But the depth at the position, you see what Brian Flores is doing, and you see what this Miami Dolphin team is doing that they've never done before. Because we've always thrown Ndamukong Suh $100 million. He gets injured. We have no one behind him. We throw Brandon Albert $100,000. He gets injured. We have no one behind him. For the first time, the Miami Dolphins are like, look, we'll give you about $10 million, maybe $8 million a year, because we need depth behind you. And it feels good that, Xavier Howard goes down. All right, cool. Noah Igbenogany, you're the next guy up, and you're not like, oh my God, we're screwed. You're like, all right, cool, we're good in that position. So it just feels good that as a whole right now the Dolphins are doing their thing, and that the secondary just looks incredibly dangerous.
Love that you nailed the Igbenogany pronunciation. You're also a guy who used the word amalgamation in the same paragraph, so your vocabulary is Tua. like he throws a ball, you spit words out there. So bravo to you.
And being a dyslexic, that says a lot. So
No, come on now. So Brian, a segue you'll never hear anywhere else. Brian, what is your take and read on the next groupings of fantastic cornerbacks? We've seen duos before. We've seen defensive backfields that are, just a sea of just hurt, whether it be pass defense, not throwing the ball to them. You make a great point, Doug, because if a lockdown cornerback is so good, you know what a good cornerback doesn't do? Throw towards a lockdown cornerback. So that's just ridiculous that people say no interceptions, he's not good. So, Brian, the importance of a Byron Jones on top of everything else, what's your overall take on those cornerbacks?
Yeah, I'm not as carefree as Doug on Xavier Howard's pup list because you got to break it down to one of two things is happening. One, they're just being super careful with that knee. They put too much mileage on it in training camp last year, and it broke down a little bit because it's not a thing that's ever going to be 100% better. It's always going to be a thing where you just have to monitor and keep miles off it. So if that's the case, that's what's happening. I'm really happy with that. I say he probably comes back about 8 or 9 days before the season starts. Just don't put those mileage on it. He doesn't need a long camp. He's a vet. He knows what he's doing. But the other aspect of it is it's a little scary is this because there was a setback? The procedure he had was not very intense. It was a while ago. Preston Williams is not on the PUP list, and he had an ACL after week 8. So if there is a setback and they're not letting that out, that's terrifying. And I agree that it's probably 80% chance just we're taking the mileage off that knee. But the fact that that's even out there, I mean, if Howard doesn't play very close to 16 games, we're never really going to get to see that gruesome twosome that we have in Jones and Howard because I can't see them taking another year where he plays 8 or 9 games and being okay with that. He makes way too much money. So fingers crossed Howard gets there. And, with that said, those two guys are, our top 4 position guys are really our top 5 guys are locks. Iggy's I'm going to call him Iggy because I'm not the wordsmith that Doug is. He's going to be moving to that slot corner. But, like Doug said, he plays really well in the slot, but he also has the frame and the technique. He's a little green, but he can definitely move outside and be a number 2 corner in this league. So I love that flexibility and like how we talked about the linebackers. I think the remaining guys on this roster, it's going to be that, like Nick Needham's going to need to improve in the slot on top of his outside play to lock down that next position, which I think he has the heads up on. You got to think that I can't say this guy's name either, that Clayton, the safety, has a good chance of making it the free agent from Cincinnati. Then there's going to be a battle between Parker, Perry, Webster.
Yeah.
I got to see Tankersley. I mean, dude's going to have to ball to make a chance. He hasn't played in 28 games. He's probably, like if there was a wolf coming up on a herd of sheep, Tankersley's right now, like limping behind the herd. He's the guy that I think is easy pickings, but you never know. I mean, the dude he played starting for us the first season. He looked good at times. So could he come back? But I think those last couple positions are going to, show yourself at nickel and safety, show yourself outside and nickel are going to be the guy that sets it apart from and makes this roster. It's going to be a tough group to crack because those first 5 to 6 positions are completely locked down.
Absolutely right. Dead on, and looking at the position as a whole, I mean, the group as a whole is a defensive backfield. Yes, the weak link is what's going to happen at safety. You got a guy like Brandon Jones, who was drafted from Texas, who is wearing number 29. So who doesn't love that?
I love it.
Just saying, kind of glad I kept the Minka jersey. Now it's just buying a nameplate purchase.
Yeah, just get
That's
a seam return.
That's just the missus sewing job upstairs. And we're great. So
I gave mine to Goodwill, so I'm a little jealous.
When
they traded him, I needed it out of my house.
I have an attic full of Dolphin jerseys that weren't.
Oh, yeah. I have a Chad Henne jersey.
It weighs a lot more than my current stack of jerseys that I represent, including the first one, gentlemen. You can see the wear. That's weird. But, the safety group is tough.
Yeah.
If we're going to look at it, we need to find that next safety. Don't want to spend too much time as a whole because we got the offense to hit. But if you want to lump in, Doug, the safety situation, What are your overall assessments there?
It worries me. I think it's one of the few positions we have that worries me. Eric Rowe, I love him at safety. I think he did a fantastic job. He warranted getting that contract extension. Brandon Jones, the new 29. I'll never have to say the other guy's name because he can kick rocks for all I care. You got. I'll help out Brian. It's Fedulum. That's how you pronounce his name. It has to be Swedish or something because it's like a weird spelling. But Fedulum, I like him. He's going to be a big. Think of him as Walt Aikens, right? Think of him as Walt Aikens' replacement. Huge special teamer. He's going to be cracking people left and right on returns. Love Fedulum. Bobby McCain. Now, I love Bobby McCain as a Dolphin. I love Bobby McCain as a player. Bobby McCain as a safety, I'm still about it. You know, I like what Brian Flores does. A lot of people like to say that I'm, too positive and I'm a fence hopper where I stay in the middle of everything. Brian Flores taking Bobby McCain and putting him at safety is probably the only thing that man has done that I was like, what are you doing, dude? Just leave him at slot corner. Get a safety. I didn't like moving him at safety. I would have preferred them leaving Bobby McCain at slot. He needs to prove to me this year that he can play better at safety. He played all right at safety while he was playing last season, but I think safety, besides Eric Rowe, it worries me a little bit, but that's just because I need to see more out of Bobby. But then you never know. Brandon Jones once being healthy and doing his thing, maybe he pushes Bobby out of that starting position, and all of a sudden that 29 looks sexy again. And it's not a guy who in 2018 had an up and down irregular season. And I'm going to stop because I'm going to get in trouble. You
look a little emotional.
I just don't like babies. I'm sorry. I don't like babies.
Okay. Brian, we'll move to you. We'll let Doug compose. Any non-Minka, any non-other 29 thoughts?
Yeah, with Doug on the Bobby McCain, I love, you want Bobby McCain's on your team, right? Like you want 53 Bobby McCain's on your team. The guy is just a leader. He balls out. He's coming with 100% all the time. But yeah, to put him at free safety, it looked out of sorts last year. But hopefully that was smart. Get the year of out of sorts last year off the. We have to turn him into a true center fielder because he looked out of his element trying to come up and make the tackles from the safety spot. He is a good tackler at nickel, but it's a completely different, responsibility there. Brandon Jones is more of an in the box safety. So I think he's going to get a lot of playing time on first and second down, moving Rowe to the strong safety role more and passing down to blanket tight ends. So we'll have to see how that goes. We'll just have to see how this shapes out. I hope Bobby can step up, but it's definitely my first priority of next year is that true free safety because we have two strong safeties that are true and not really a free safety that is.
You mentioned that like center field, you're absolutely right. So that's basically the defense in a nutshell. Going to be guys on the bubble, going to be guys, I think, on the defensive ball. If there are trades, it's going to be that side of the ball. And when it goes down, flipping to the offensive side, the good news is, we can talk about the quarterback situation all we want, but we don't have to because it's a conversation for another show, frankly.
That's an hour in
we
itself.
know what's going to happen. There's a good quarterback room of 3 people, and we don't want any more enemies, so we're going to move on.
There you go.
Do you see any cuts? Do you see, are you guys with me that there's these 3 guys are going to ride the season?
No, unless there's a massive extenuating circumstance that is like a shockwave through the NFL. Mm-hmm. Quarterback in the NFC North goes down. They give a call to Miami. We need a quarterback. Well, we got one that's on the market. He cost us a second rounder. Pause.
Yeah.
So if that happens, we'll talk about it. But yes, Brian, with you. Unless you really want to go crazy about, hearing what, Fitz said at the press conference yesterday. He's saying all the right things, and he means them. Tua is the truth in terms of player, person, publicity. I mean, they're all doing the right thing. So let's not worry about it.
Nope.
With that said, let's talk about the offensive line because that's what we have to worry about. And Brian, you're my stat guy. So if I miss a number, maybe you can fact check me if I'm wrong. I don't think I'm wrong. They were the 32nd ranked offensive line last year. You could fact check me if need be. But
pretty solid statement
thank you. I was worried.
across the board.
Is it possible to be 33rd ranked?
Yeah.
Beyond the worry is, other than the statistical analysis, other than the old famous 1970s version of an eye test, which was worse than the statistical analysis, we don't have a continuation of group. We don't have the gel. You have two nice free agents that were brought in Eric Flowers and Ted Karras. No complaints. I loved what they were thinking. When everyone was wondering what the Dolphins were going to do with all those first couple of top 60 picks, I just said, give me 1,000 pounds on the offensive line. I'm a happy man. And so far, those things are working. Now it's on tape. This is a position group that's going to be hurt from not having reps. This is what bothers me. We need to know where people are going to play. Austin Jackson, we know he's a young left tackle, right? But we need to worry about eventually the right tackle for the lefty. We need to worry about the center. Who's going to play center? Jesse Davis had time at center, but really he was just covering, so we don't know if he's going to be center. Brian, what are your thoughts on the offensive line, and are you going to be in a optimistic, glass half full, or glass half empty this year with the offensive line?
So first thing I have to cover, and this aggravated me yesterday at the press conference, Jesse Davis played center last week in camp when only rookies and injured people were there.
Right.
He literally said in the press conference that the only reason I did it was because no one else was there. The other element of that
position.
Yep.
The other element of that is they're not in real training camp yet. They're not allowed to do football drills. The only thing they're allowed to do is do walkthroughs. So he literally said he played center in a walkthrough because no other center was there. He then later told that center is probably the only position you can rule me out of. I'm going to be on the right side more than likely, but I'm open to moving to left tackle if need be. Can we stop with the Jesse Davis to center talk, because it's not happening?
Yes.
It was more of a ruse on Omar Kelly's question than it was on the status of where Jesse Davis is.
You hit that one out of the park. Lobbed it for you. You ooped it.
Thank you. But yeah, I mean, so you have to love that they addressed the O-line like they did. It's 32nd overall, and they did a complete overhauling. The only thing you can't love is there's a lot of question marks, right? There's a lot of young guys. Even the guys that we brought in, Flowers and Karras, they each have 1 year of good tape. Their tape before last year wasn't great. Karras wasn't a starter at center. He was more of a guard, more of a makeshift guard in his career in New England. He'd kind of pop in when they needed him, but he didn't win a spot outright. He only came in last year because their center went down. He did play really well at center. But in Flowers, he was moved to left guard after probably being the worst left tackle in all of football in New York. So I like Flowers at guard. I like Karras. I think they're obviously going to be better than they were last year, but there's going to be a lot of questions. And this, Fitzpatrick talked about the beginning of the season is going to be sloppy, and it's going to be sloppy on our offensive line. At best, we're only going to start 4 new guys. Jesse Davis is quite possibly the only guy that will be playing this year that played last year regularly. So there's a lot of questions. I'm optimistic in the fact that I think they made the right moves. We'll see. We won't see very soon though, because we don't get any preseason games. So, but the other thing is too, if Austin Jackson didn't win the left tackle spot and there was a preseason and there was 4 preseason games, I'd be very worried. If Austin Jackson doesn't win the left tackle spot this year with no preseason, I won't be as worried. He just didn't have the reps. He didn't have the time. I expect those first 3 weeks to be like preseason games. I also expect a lot of penalties out of this group the first couple weeks of the year.
That's a good point.
But I also expect great growth. I'm very interested in who's going to shake out. I think Dieter gets moved inside to center full time, back up Karras, and maybe next year is his year to shine. But I think the right guard spot is going to be very interesting with the position battle. Let's assume Robert Hunt sticks at right tackle. Cross our fingers, please let him stay there. That right guard spot's going to be fought over pretty heavily between Jesse Davis, Danny Isadora, You got to think Dieter will try to get in there a little bit. Solomon Kidley, the 4th round draft choice. So there's going to be 4 guys that are really fighting for that spot. Outside of that, it's pretty obvious who's going to make this team. I would think, maybe we have one surprise, or maybe we get a guy traded if, a couple compete. But, obviously they're probably cutting Pankey. They're probably cutting Sutherland. They're probably, Danny Isadora is even a guy that he was a 3rd round pick. We invested to draft capital in, but if he doesn't ball, he's probably going to be the odd guy out. I will be interested to see if they keep an extra O lineman and maybe cut back on wide receiver, because this is going to be a susceptible, like COVID, we can't ignore that. The people that are more susceptible than any other people are the 300-pound guys, so I wouldn't be surprised if they keep an extra guy, expecting that to happen. But we'll see how this shakes out. I would just say withhold judgment. It's going to be sloppy the first couple of weeks. So, and as it should be, it's 4 new starters, 2 rookies. It's a recipe for sloppy play, but if they improve, and thank God we have the 16-year vet quarterback taking the initial snaps. So to make up for these guys, the mistakes they will make.
Well said. The offensive line is a work in progress. I will say one thing that I would love to hear, if there's practicing and there's after practice work. You made a great point, Roy, about Michael Dieter, about how he could maybe be center, be transitioned inside. I would love for Fitzpatrick and Karras to, after practice, take Tua and Dieter and say, we're just doing 100 snaps right now. Put the pads down, put the helmet down, 100 snaps, do drop backs or something to that nature. Because Karras, he doesn't have to necessarily be on the field for 16 games, 100 snaps per game, whatever the case may be, for his value to be a coach on the field, a coach on the sidelines. So the offensive line, work in progress. I know, we have other areas to touch on. We want to keep this a little bit, under that time restraint. So, Doug, is there any other offensive line talk? Because the rest of the position on offense, more cut and dry. But offensive line, there's that concern to spend another moment on if there's need be.
Yeah, definitely. And Brian said a ton of things that I agree with 100%. We have a lot of young guys. Offensive line is the number 1 position right now that worries me because it's that important. You don't have a good offensive line. We have 2019 all over again with, Ryan Fitzpatrick, who did come out and say you can bet he won't be the leading rusher. But if there's no holes and all of a sudden quarterback scrambles is going to be your leading rusher, it does worry me. I hope and pray that Austin Jackson just shows how big and physical this kid is. He's raw talent, but just the physicality of him is great. I love the addition. My prediction for the offensive line is Austin Jackson left tackle, Eric Flowers left guard, Ted Karras center. I have Jesse Davis at right guard and Hunt at right tackle. Jesse Davis did say that he was mostly worrying about the right tackle, right guard position. Like Brian said, they threw him over on the left a little bit. And also, like Brian said, they didn't have enough centers. Relax. It's just, he literally said it. He's like, oh, we didn't have enough centers. So I just, did a few things at center. My Twitter blew up when that happened. Doug, Jesse Davis at center? I'm like, no, man, just stop. He's on the right side of the ball. Just stop. But it does worry me because Jesse Davis, that's the only guy coming back from last year who's going to be a starter. You got Solomon Kinley. He's potential to battle for that right guard position. But if Dieter was good enough to be the starter this year, they wouldn't have brought in as many offensive linemen, and he would have played better last year. But yeah, in a nutshell, the offensive line, it needs a lot of work. The one thing that is different about the defense and the offense is the guys that are carried over from the defense last year, it's going to be the same defense. Because all we did was take the secondary coach and make him the defensive coordinator. And players have said that the secondary coach had more of a voice than Patrick Graham did. So the defense is going to be the same. It's the offense that's going to be different with Chan Gailey. So even the carryovers are going to have to learn a little bit more. And one last thing I'm going to say, you brought up Adam Pankey as being cut. I also thought he's going to be cut. I tweeted it out, and Adam Pankey liked my tweet, and I felt like a complete douche after he liked my tweet saying that he's going to be cut. I don't know how he found me, but I feel horrible. So if he's listening to this again for the 3rd time, Adam, I hope you make the team.
Hey, you know what? That's as the mayor, that was extremely diplomatic. You went one way and you kept both sides happy. I mean, I love it. Now, good talk, guys, on the offensive line. The skill positions, you know, to wrap really up, you know, the early summer building the roster, and we're going to do this again in the coming weeks and check to see how we do. But there's, by my count, 5 receivers fighting for one last receiver spot. There's one running back who is in dire straits of making this team. I'm not going to say his name because I don't want to get found by this gentleman on Twitter. But so Kalen Ballage is the running back. But other than wide receivers that we know, Mr. Jennings, Mr. Mac Hollins, you know, Isaiah Ford, rookies Merritt and Matt Cole, who those two could be special team contenders, but that's a sidebar. Brian, we'll start with you. How do you is skill positions? You know, what do you see that is not really out there, but it's kind of really, it's out there, isn't it?
Yeah, it's mostly locked down, as you said. Like running back, we know Howard and Burita are going to be 1-2 punch. We know they're on this team. And then we have, you know, 3 guys fighting it out. I don't really think it's a fight. If you look at the tape last year, Laird and Gaskin completely outperformed Ballage in every aspect, catching, blocking, and running. I think he did well in camp last year, and it got him snaps over Drake, so he has to bring that again. But they're also going to be reluctant on that because it was fool's gold last year. I just don't see him breaking through. The only interesting thing to me on running back is really going to be Chandler Cox. You know, we drafted this kid last year. I love the addition of a fullback in the New England style offense. A fullback is very important. Chan Gailey, he usually has one, but it's not as important. And, you know, as you may know, Elandon Roberts, the linebacker we picked up out of New England, he took over for fullback last year in New England. So he can give them that flexibility if they absolutely need one. But most spread offenses don't line up with a fullback very often. I like Cox. I hope he makes it. We'll see what happens there. But I think the running backs are pretty locked in. And it's also going to stay fluid. You know, if there's a guy that there's another team that has a stacked backfield, I don't see any of our bottom 3 being safe. You know, another guy could come in from another practice squad and probably unseat Laird, Gaskin, or Ballage. The wide receiver is a little interesting, but mostly locked down. I feel like you have Hearns in, and I got way worse killed on Twitter over my Jakeem Grant take than you did by Adam Pankey. But I gotta say that I think that Grant is a little bit susceptible. He's going to need to show that wide receiver skill. He couldn't handle punt returns. So we paid this guy a lot of money last year, and he got punt returns completely taken off of his plate. You know, I don't see him unseating Preston Williams, Albert Wilson, and Devontae Parker as wide receivers. So, like, how do we justify, you know, like, I think the start of camp, he'd be behind Allen Hearns probably as our 5th wide receiver. So how do you justify $5 million to a guy just to return kicks when you have Kirk Merrick behind him, when you have Cole behind him? We drafted Jones, who is a great kick returner, the safety. So that's going to be interesting to see if that shapes out. I root for Jakeem Grant because I absolutely love him. Like, just like Bobby McCain, you want 53 Jakeem Grants on your team. He's a team player. He gives it his all. He's, you know, if you follow him on Instagram, like, he doesn't have an off season. I think he's running to the refrigerator and like sprint mode, you know, so you want him, but it's going to be tough. And that last spot is going to be very interesting. Isaiah Ford showed he was an NFL caliber wide receiver. Jennings from Virginia Tech, you know, taken from Seattle. He played all last year on the IR. He came over for like 1 snap. I think he got injured in a celebration, but he was very talented. And then I'm very intrigued by Kirk Merritt. I would put money that this kid's going to make this team. But it's hard because of Ford, because of Grant, because of Jennings. It's going to be this is a spot, right? We always talk about the 6 wide receiver. This time of year, we talk about the 6 wide receiver ad nauseum, and then we don't say his name until like week 12 when like 2 guys are on the IRR. Even if it's him, because it's usually not even the guy. He usually went to the practice squad, got picked up. We picked up another guy in there as our 6 wide receiver. So we'll see how this shakes out. I'm rooting for Kirk Merritt, but our top three guys are locked in. We have Williams, Wilson, and Parker. You're going to see Gesicki line up at wide receiver in the spread offense a lot.
Yep.
So those first three spots are locked down. The guys after that are looking for breadcrumbs,
Exactly right. And we will get us all out of here with Doug's take on the overall, skill positions. And if there's anything, if you want to put your money on one of those last wide receivers to make this team, we won't hold you to it, and we won't retweet it to the guys and tag them in Twitter to have them come find you.
I will take bets on merit. I will put cash money on merit, Robin, this last job.
I'm with you there.
Yeah, definitely. This skill position, I'm very excited. Brian brought up some really good names. Chandler Cox. I loved when they picked up Chandler Cox. I hope he makes the team, but it's new offense. Changaley. We'll see what they do with that. Alan Hearns is a guy that I got in trouble for, not by him personally, but by my subscribers, because I said that if Kirk Merritt is equal to skill set and equal to production as an Alan Hearns, we actually saved $2 million by cutting Alan Hearns because his dead cap's only $800,000. I see that happening. If it's the same player, you're going to go with the younger guy you're going to have for longer for cheaper versus Alan Hearns. So I don't be surprised if Alan Hearns gets cut to make room for Kirk Merritt to make the team, because I think Kirk Merritt and Matt Cole are both going to make the team. I personally think that. Also, we can't forget about the Swiss Army knife, Malcolm Perry, the 7th round pick. Yes, thank you. The 7th round pick going to come in here, do his thing. He's going to be all over the place. Wide receiver, is he going to do things at quarterback? Bouncing all over. But when you look at the special position and all these like wide receivers, tight ends, and stuff, the one position that always worried me, and it still worries me, is tight end. Besides Gesicki, we got no one. We pick up Adam Sheehan for a 7th round conditional pick. That's essentially what we got for Charles Harris. So technically it's not even our pick. It's the Falcons pick. But other than that, it's like, Smythe is a good run blocking, can potentially catch, but he's no Anthony Fasano. And then you got, Mayrick, who, and then we have a defensive end that we transferred to tight end. If Gesicki gets hurt, oh God, is it going to be bad? So I think, looking at the team, the specialty positions as a whole, wide receiver is super deep. And I could see them bringing a good 5-6 with them, especially because they run a base 3 wide receiver set. Running backs, we talked about it. Howard, Breida. I don't see Balaj making the team, but again, I'm going to get in trouble for that. Gaskins,
I'll fight with you, man. I'm on that hill with you.
Gaskins and Laird, those could be their 4 running backs. It's just tight end. It's like, we got Gaskins. Great. I love him. It was one of the tight ends towards the end of the season when it came to receptions and targets. And then you got the rest of the roster of tight ends. And it's like, Sheehan, if he could stay healthy, I think that's the 1-2 punch we'll have there. Because Sheehan is they call him a baby Gronk, which I hate because I don't like Gronk. So let's call him a baby Sheehan. Let's call him a Sheehan, He could do his thing.
We want one Sheehan, not the next Gronk.
Exactly. But that's the only, it's super deep. And I think, honestly, and when it comes to wide receiver, that is the camp battle to watch because there's so much talent there. Somebody that the fans like, Alan Hearns, Jakeem Grant, they're going to get cut, and it's going to piss off a lot of people. But yeah, I'm very excited for these 3 different positions.
It's camp. It's the summer. It's weird with COVID, but it's great. I hope everything is really just healthy with you guys and family. And of course, you're taking time out. We're taping this on Sunday, so we're going to air this in the middle of the week. So if anything does happen, please blow up our mentions accordingly. But this was taped on Sunday. And of course, Doug, thank you so much, my friend. And if there's anything that you could just finalizing and letting the folks know where to find your work, what's cooking in your world?
Always a pleasure coming on. Love chatting with you guys. It's always fun. Douglie Do Wrong, youtube.com/DouglieDoWrong. If you need to find me anywhere, Twitter, Instagram, my PlayStation Network, Xbox, anywhere, Douglie Do Wrong. It's a very unique name, so I was able to get it on everything. So if you need to find me anywhere, it's Douglie Do Wrong. I'm super excited for this team. It has a ton of promise. My saying on my channel, I'd rather be surprised than let down. So a lot of people want to know, hey, Doug, what do you think about the team? Cautiously optimistic, because it hurts when you have high expectations and they don't meet it. So I'm very, very excited for this team. Ton of young promise. Sky's the limit for this team.
Love it. And cautiously optimistic is a tattoo that I have on the back of my neck in orange and aqua. Anyway, Brian, you are, always on Twitter, really just uniting the community. So if there's anything you could let us know with what you're working on and what's going on in the Fin Addicts Network, the floor is yours.
Yeah, not too much. We are finalizing our last few spots in our Fin Addicts Network Fantasy Football League. So if you aren't in a Fantasy Football League, the idea behind this was inclusion. So hit me up. We'll get you in those last couple spots. And then, we have the Fin Addicts Miami Dolphins podcast. They drop every Thursday. We have a really great guest this week with Lindsay OK. So look for that. It should be as she moves the needle, it should be at least controversial a little bit. So that should be fun. And just check out the Fin Addicts Network. We always have stuff going on.
Love it. And again, thank you guys for Douglie Do Wrong on YouTube, for Brian Byrne all over Twitter. My name is Jason Sarney. Thanks for joining the Deep Dive. Have a good one, everybody.